Robert Caldwell stood at the edge of the crowded ballroom, nursing a glass of scotch he had barely touched. The annual charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art was in full swing, filled with New York's elite in designer gowns and tuxedos. As the 58-year-old tech billionaire scanned the room with disinterest, his world suddenly stopped. Across the room, a young woman in a simple blue dress laughed at something her companion said. Robert's glass nearly slipped from his fingers. The way she tilted her head back slightly when she laughed, the curve of her jawline, the distinctive way she gestured with her hands. It was Elizabeth. His Elizabeth, who had been gone for 5 years now. Impossible, Robert whispered to himself, setting his drink down with a shaking hand. His heart hammered against his ribs as he moved through the crowd, mumbling apologies as he bumped into guests. The young woman turned slightly, giving Robert a clearer view of her profile. The resemblance was even more striking up close, the same high cheekbones, the same slightly upturned nose, even the same small mole near her left ear that Elizabeth had always been self-conscious about. "Sir, are you all right?" His assistant, James, appeared at his side, concern etched on his face. Robert ignored him, continuing toward the woman who now stood alone by a display of ancient artifacts. She couldn't have been more than 25, much too young to be Elizabeth. Yet the resemblance was too perfect to be random chance. "Excuse me," Robert said, his voice hoarse as he approached her. The young woman turned, and for a moment, looking into her eyes was like looking at a ghost. But there were differences too. Her eyes were a deeper shade of green than Elizabeth's had been, and her hair was cut in a modern style Elizabeth had never worn. "Yes?" she asked, looking at him with polite curiosity. Robert struggled to find words. "I'm sorry to disturb you. My name is Robert Caldwell." Recognition flickered across her face. "The tech investor. I've read about your work. I'm Lily Morgan." She extended her hand. Robert shook it, feeling strangely disconnected from reality. "This may sound strange, but you remind me very much of someone I used to know." Lily smiled uncertainly. "I get that sometimes. I guess I just have one of those faces." "She was my wife," Robert continued, unable to stop himself. "She passed away 5 years ago." Lily's expression softened with sympathy. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Mr. Caldwell." "How old are you, if you don't mind my asking?" Robert asked. "I'm 23, Lily replied, looking slightly uncomfortable now. "And your parents? Are they here tonight?" Lily shifted her weight. "I'm actually here with my professor. I'm a graduate student at Columbia. My parents, well, my adoptive parents, live in Ohio." The word adoptive hit Robert like a physical blow. Elizabeth had never mentioned giving up a child. They had their daughter Claire, now 24, and Elizabeth had never been pregnant before they met. At least, that's what he had believed. "I'm sorry, I've made you uncomfortable," Robert said, collecting himself. "It's just, the resemblance is remarkable." "It's okay," Lily said, though her body language suggested otherwise. She glanced over his shoulder. "I should probably get back to my group." Robert nodded, handing her his business card. "If you ever want to talk, please call me." Lily took the card with a polite smile and walked away, leaving Robert standing alone with questions spinning in his mind. Questions that would lead him down a path he never could have imagined. Robert couldn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lily Morgan's face, a face so much like Elizabeth's that it defied explanation. By morning, dark circles framed his eyes as he paced his penthouse overlooking Central Park. "James, I need you to find me the best private investigator in the city," Robert said into his phone, voice rough from lack of sleep. "Money is no object." 3 hours later, Robert sat across from Diana Wells, a former FBI agent turned private investigator with a reputation for discretion and thoroughness. "I need information on this young woman," Robert said, sliding a paper with Lily's name across the polished desk. "Everything you can find, specifically about her adoption." Diana raised an eyebrow but asked no questions beyond the essentials. "I'll need a week, maybe 2. "You have 3 days," Robert replied, writing a check with more zeros than most people saw in a lifetime. While Diana worked, Robert found himself drawn to the storage room where he kept Elizabeth's belongings. He hadn't been in there since shortly after her death, when the pain of seeing her things had become too much to bear. The room smelled faintly of her perfume, roses and vanilla, as he opened boxes of photographs. There was Elizabeth at 25, around the time they'd met. She looked so much like Lily it was startling. Robert examined the dates on the photos, realizing with a start that there was a gap, nearly a full year missing when Elizabeth would have been 22. "What were you doing that year?" he whispered to the photo in his hand. His phone rang, jarring him from his thoughts. It was Claire, their daughter, calling from Paris, where she was studying art history. "Dad, is everything okay? James called and said you were acting strange." Robert hesitated. Should he tell Claire about Lily? No, not yet, not until he had more information. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Just feeling a bit nostalgic. I was looking at some of your mother's old photos." The conversation ended with promises to call more often, but Robert felt guilty about hiding his suspicions from Claire. 2 days later, Diana arrived at his office with a thin file folder. "Well?" Robert asked, not bothering with pleasantries. Diana opened the folder. Lily Morgan was adopted at birth through a private adoption agency in Chicago that closed 15 years ago. Her birth records are sealed, which is normal, but she paused. "But what?" Robert leaned forward. "There's something odd. Someone has gone to extraordinary lengths to keep those records sealed beyond the usual protections. When I tried to access them through my contacts, I hit walls I'd never encountered before." Robert frowned. "Someone doesn't want those records found." "Exactly. But I did discover that Lily has been searching for her birth parents for the past 2 years. She's hit the same roadblocks." Robert stared out the window at the city skyline. Elizabeth was from Chicago originally. "There's more," Diana continued. "Lily's medical records show she has the same rare blood type as your late wife. And there's this." She pulled out a photocopy of Lily's birth certificate. Her birth date is April 12, 2002. Robert's blood ran cold. Claire had been born on April 12, 2002. "I need to look through Elizabeth's things again," Robert said, his voice barely audible. That evening, he returned to the storage room with renewed purpose. He examined Elizabeth's old desk that he kept intact, running his fingers along the edges until he felt something, a small, hidden button. Pressing it revealed a secret compartment containing a small, locked box he'd never seen before. The key wasn't there, but for a man who had built his fortune breaking through digital locks, a simple mechanical one posed little challenge. Inside, he found letters, hospital records, and a photograph that would change everything he thought he knew about the woman he had loved. Robert's hands trembled as he spread the contents of the box across his desk. Yellowed hospital documents from Chicago Memorial Hospital dated March 2002 lay beside faded photographs and handwritten letters addressed to someone named Sarah. The header on the hospital papers read "Twin birth, female infants," followed by clinical details and 2 small footprints. "Twins," Robert whispered, the word hanging in the silent room. A photograph showed a much younger Elizabeth in a hospital bed holding 2 identical newborn girls wrapped in pink blankets. The joy on her face was mixed with something else, something that looked like fear or deep worry. Robert reached for his phone. "Maria, I need you to come to the penthouse immediately." Maria Rodriguez had been Elizabeth's personal assistant for 15 years, staying on after her death to help Robert manage the charitable foundation established in Elizabeth's name. If anyone knew Elizabeth's secrets, it would be Maria. An hour later, Maria sat across from Robert, her face pale as she stared at the items spread before her. "You knew, didn't you?" Robert asked quietly. Maria looked up, her eyes filled with guilt. "She made me promise never to tell anyone, even you." "I need to know everything," Robert said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. Maria took a deep breath. "When I first started working for Elizabeth, before she met you, she told me she had a daughter named Claire. But one night, after too much wine, she broke down and told me the truth, that Claire had a twin sister. Why would she give up one child and keep the other?" Robert asked, trying to keep the anger from his voice. "She was only 21, Mr. Caldwell. Her parents had disowned her when she got pregnant. The father was her college professor who wanted nothing to do with her or the babies. She was alone, struggling to make ends meet with her small graphic design business. She believed she could manage 1 baby, but not 2. Robert ran his hands through his silver hair. "But later, when we were married, when money was no object, why not try to find her other daughter?" Maria's eyes filled with tears. Shame, mostly, and fear. She was afraid of how Claire would react, how you would react to learning she'd hidden such a big secret. The longer she waited, the harder it became to tell the truth. Robert held up one of the letters. Who is Sarah? Sarah Mitchell was the adoption counselor who handled the case. These letters show Elizabeth tried to check on the baby through her. The adoption was closed, but Sarah would send general updates saying the child was healthy and happy. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they formed was breaking Robert's heart. He picked up a document that seemed to be from a detective agency, dated just 6 months before Elizabeth was diagnosed with cancer. She was looking for her, Robert said. Maria nodded. After Claire left for college, Elizabeth decided it was time to try to find her other daughter. She hired investigators, but the adoptive family had moved several times. She was getting close when she got sick, Robert finished. The last few months, she talked about telling you the truth, but she was so weak from the treatments. She made me promise that if anything happened to her, I would eventually find a way to let you know. Robert stared at the photograph of the twin babies. Claire doesn't know she has a sister, does she? No, Maria confirmed. Elizabeth wanted to be the one to tell her. Robert stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. The young woman I met at the gala, Lily, she must be Claire's twin. The timing, the resemblance, it can't be coincidence. What will you do now? Maria asked quietly. Robert turned, a new determination in his eyes. I'm going to finish what Elizabeth started. I'm going to bring our family together. But first, I need to understand exactly what happened 23 years ago in Chicago. He picked up the phone to call Diana Wells again. The investigation was just beginning. The flight to Chicago was turbulent, but Robert barely noticed. His mind was filled with questions as the private jet cut through storm clouds. Diana sat across from him, reviewing old records they had gathered about Elizabeth's life before he knew her. Elizabeth Bennett, age 21, admitted to Chicago Memorial on April 12, 2002. Diana read from a file. We were able to locate the retired nurse who was present for the delivery. Robert nodded, staring out the window at the city lights appearing below them as they descended. And she's willing to talk to us. For what you're paying, yes. 2 hours later, they sat in the modest living room of Margaret Wilson, a woman in her 70s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She studied Robert's face carefully. I remember your wife, Margaret said, placing a cup of tea in front of him. Such a young thing to be going through that alone. Twins are never easy, even with support. Can you tell me what happened? Robert asked. Margaret settled into her armchair. Elizabeth was scared. She had no family support. Her parents had cut her off when she refused to end the pregnancy. The baby's father was some professor who threatened to ruin her if she named him publicly. Robert's hands tightened around his teacup. Elizabeth had told him her parents died before they met. Another lie in what was becoming a mountain of deception. She came to the hospital determined to place both babies for adoption, Margaret continued. But after the delivery, when we placed those little girls in her arms, the nurse's eyes grew distant with memory. Something changed. She couldn't bear to give them both up. But she also knew she couldn't care for 2 infants on her own. So she kept Claire and gave up the other baby, Robert said, the reality of Elizabeth's impossible choice sinking in. It destroyed her to separate them, Margaret said softly. I've seen many adoptions, Mr. Caldwell, but I've never seen someone in such agony. She made the agency promise that her daughters would know they were adopted if they ever asked. Did she name the second baby? Diana asked. Lily, Margaret said. She named her Lily Elizabeth Bennett. She told me she hoped someday they would find each other. The name hit Robert like a physical blow. Lily. Not a coincidence after all. There's something else you should know, Margaret added, reaching for a small photo album. Elizabeth had a family history that worried her. Her mother struggled with severe bipolar disorder, and her younger sister had schizophrenia. Elizabeth was terrified she might not be able to care for even one child as she developed symptoms. She showed them a newspaper clipping about Elizabeth's sister, Sarah Bennett, not an adoption counselor as Maria had believed, who had taken her own life after years of struggling with mental illness. Elizabeth checked herself for signs of mental illness constantly, Margaret explained. She was convinced that having twins meant each baby had a higher chance of developing problems. She thought that by separating them, at least one might escape the family curse, as she called it. Robert felt dizzy with this new information. Elizabeth had carried these fears and secrets their entire marriage, never trusting him enough to share them. Did she ever try to check on Lily after the adoption? Robert asked. Margaret nodded. She set up a trust fund for the girl, anonymous of course, and every year on their birthday, she would send me a card to forward to the adoption agency for Lily. I don't know if they ever passed them along. On the flight back to New York, Robert sat in silence, piecing together the woman he thought he knew with this new reality. Elizabeth had lived with fear, guilt, and grief throughout their marriage. How had he never noticed? His phone buzzed with a text from Claire. Dad, when are you coming back? I'm flying home tomorrow. We need to talk. Robert stared at the message. How could he tell his daughter that her entire life had been built on a foundation of secrets? Robert paced the length of his penthouse living room, stopping occasionally to glance at his phone. Claire's flight had landed an hour ago. His driver had picked her up, and they would arrive any minute. How could he possibly tell her about Lily? The elevator chimed, and Claire walked in, her blonde hair, so like her mother's, pulled back in a simple ponytail. She dropped her bags and rushed to hug him. Dad, what's going on? You've been so cryptic on the phone, she said, pulling back to study his face. You look terrible. Have you been sleeping? Robert led her to the sofa. Claire, there's something I need to tell you. It's about your mother. Claire's body tensed. Is it about her cancer? Did they find something new in her medical records? No, nothing like that. Robert took a deep breath. It's about you, and about someone else. He showed her the documents and photos he had discovered. Claire's hands shook as she looked at the hospital records, the birth certificates, and finally, the photo of her mother holding two identical newborn girls. This can't be real, she whispered, touching the image of the babies. I have a sister, a twin sister, and Mom never told me. She never told either of us, Robert said gently. Claire's eyes filled with tears. Where is she? My sister. Her name is Lily Morgan. She lives here in New York. She's a graduate student at Columbia. Claire's head snapped up. You found her already? Have you met her? By complete chance, Robert explained the gala, the shocking resemblance that had started his investigation. Does she know about me? About us? Claire asked, wiping away tears. Not yet. She knows she's adopted, and she's been searching for her birth parents, but she doesn't know about you. Claire stood up suddenly. We have to tell her. Now, today. Robert was surprised by her certainty. Are you sure? This is a lot to process. Dad, think about it. She's been searching, wondering who she is, where she came from. We can't keep this from her now that we know. Claire's eyes flashed with determination. Mom kept this secret for 23 years. That's long enough. Robert nodded slowly. I have her number. I could call and ask to meet. Do it, Claire said firmly. 30 minutes later, Robert hung up the phone. She agreed to meet us tomorrow afternoon at the cafe near her apartment. Claire stared out the window. What will we say to her? Hello, I'm your identical twin sister that you never knew existed. We'll tell her the truth, Robert said. All of it. The next day, they arrived at the small cafe 15 minutes early. Claire couldn't sit still, alternating between fixing her hair and rearranging the sugar packets on the table. What if she hates us? Claire whispered. What if she blames us somehow? We didn't know either, Robert reminded her. We're all victims of this secret. The cafe door opened, and Lily walked in. Seeing her and Claire in the same room was startling. They were mirror images of each other, down to the way they both tucked their hair behind their ear when nervous. Lily approached their table cautiously. Mr. Caldwell? Robert stood. Lily, thank you for coming. This is my daughter, Claire. The two young women stared at each other in shock. Claire stood slowly, her hand covering her mouth. What is this? Lily asked, her voice barely a whisper. Who are you people? Please, sit down, Robert said gently. We have something important to tell you. Lily sat, her eyes never leaving Claire's face. You look exactly like me. I'm your sister, Claire said, tears streaming down her face. Your twin sister. Robert placed the birth certificates on the table. Lily, we recently discovered that my late wife, Elizabeth, was your birth mother. She gave birth to twin girls, you and Claire. Lily's hand trembled as she reached for the documents. I've been searching for my birth parents for years. No one would tell me anything. We didn't know either, Claire said, reaching across the table. Mom never told us about you. We just found out days ago. Lily looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain and wonder. Why would she keep me a secret? Why would she give me away and keep Claire? Robert took a deep breath, preparing to explain the impossible choice a young, frightened Elizabeth had made, a choice that had shaped all their lives in ways none of them could have imagined. The cafe grew quiet around them as Robert explained Elizabeth's impossible situation. Young, abandoned by everyone, and facing the birth of twins with a family history of mental illness. Lily sat motionless, absorbing each word, her eyes occasionally darting to Claire's face, her own face, reflected back at her. She was afraid she couldn't care for both of you, Robert concluded. And later, when she could have, shame and fear kept her silent. Lily stared at the birth certificate in her hands. All these years, I wondered why I was given away. I imagined my birth mother was a teenager, or maybe she didn't want children at all. She looked up, her eyes glistening. I never imagined I had a twin. Claire reached across the table hesitantly. I can't imagine how you must feel. Lily didn't take Claire's hand. You grew up with everything. Wealth, 2 parents, opportunities. While she stopped, collecting herself. My adoptive parents are good people, middle-class teachers in Ohio, but we always struggled financially. I'm here on scholarship, working 2 jobs to afford this city. The weight of privilege hung heavy in the air. Claire pulled her hand back, looking down at the table. I understand if you're angry, Robert said quietly. I'm not angry, Lily said, though her voice suggested otherwise. I'm overwhelmed. 2 days ago, my biggest concern was my thesis deadline. Now I find out my birth mother is dead, I have a twin sister, and my biological father is a billionaire. I'm not your biological father, Robert clarified gently. Elizabeth and I met when you were both around 3 years old. Lily nodded, processing this new information. Who is our father then? A professor from your mother's college. She never named him to anyone, as far as we can tell, Robert explained. He threatened her career if she did. The cafe door opened, breaking the tension as new customers entered. Lily glanced at her watch. I need some time to think about all this, she said, gathering her things. This is a lot. Claire stood quickly. Can we meet again, please? Something in Claire's desperate tone seemed to reach Lily. She paused, then nodded. I have your number now. I'll call you. After Lily left, Claire collapsed back into her chair, tears flowing freely. She hates me. She doesn't hate you, Robert said, placing his hand over hers. She's in shock. Give her time. 3 days passed with no word from Lily. Claire checked her phone constantly, growing more anxious by the hour. Robert threw himself into work, trying not to push for an outcome he couldn't control. On the 4th day, as Claire sat in the garden of their Manhattan townhouse, her phone buzzed with a text message. Central Park, by the Bethesda Fountain. 2 p.m. today. Lily. Claire arrived early, sitting nervously on a bench. When Lily appeared, she was struck again by their identical appearance. They could have been the same person in different clothes. Thank you for meeting me, Claire said as Lily sat beside her. Lily nodded, watching children sail toy boats in the water. I talked to my parents, my adoptive parents, about all this. They always told me I was adopted, but they never knew I was a twin. The agency never told them. I'm sorry, Claire said softly. Don't be, Lily replied, turning to face her. None of this is your fault, or mine. We were both just babies. She paused. I spent days being angry at a situation no one could control. But then I realized something. I have a sister. The twin sister. How many people get to discover that at our age? Claire smiled cautiously. So, what now? Now, we get to know each other, Lily said, the first genuine smile appearing on her face. I want to hear everything about growing up as Claire Caldwell, and I want to tell you about growing up as Lily Morgan. As the afternoon sun warmed the park, the twin sisters began to bridge the 23-year gap between them. They discovered shared traits neither could have learned. The same allergies, the same habit of twirling their hair when concentrating, even the same unusual love of pickles with peanut butter. By sunset, when Robert came to meet them, he found them sitting cross-legged on the grass, laughing and talking as if they'd known each other their entire lives. Which, in the deepest sense, they had. Robert watched from his study window as Claire and Lily walked through the garden, their heads bent close together in conversation. In the 2 weeks since their reunion in Central Park, Lily had become a regular visitor to the Caldwell home. Today, she had brought photo albums from her childhood, eager to share her life with her newfound sister. The sight of them together still took Robert's breath away. He turned back to his desk where Elizabeth's journal lay open, a leather-bound book he had discovered hidden behind the false bottom of her jewelry box. Elizabeth had always been private about her writing, and he had respected that during their marriage. Now, he needed to understand the woman he thought he knew. The journal entries began shortly after the twins' birth, full of anguish and guilt over her decision to separate them. As Robert turned the pages, a pattern emerged. For years, on each birthday, Elizabeth had traveled to Ohio under the pretense of business trips or spa weekends. The truth was revealed in her careful observations. Lily is 7 today. I watched from across the playground as she climbed the tallest slide. She's fearless, just like Claire. Her adoptive mother seems kind. She helped Lily tie her shoelaces and kissed her forehead. It should comfort me to see she's well loved, but the pain only deepens. Robert closed his eyes, imagining Elizabeth sitting alone in her car, watching her daughter from afar, never approaching. The secrecy had been a prison of her own making. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Maria entered with a folder. "I found the financial records you asked for," she said quietly. The documents confirmed what Robert had begun to suspect. Since 2020, Elizabeth had been anonymously funding a scholarship at Columbia University, the very scholarship that had allowed Lily to attend. She had found ways to support her daughter from a distance, never revealing herself. "Mr. Caldwell," a voice called from the doorway. Lily stood there, Claire beside her. "We were wondering if we could see Mom's old room," Claire explained. "Lily wants to see it." Robert nodded, following as Claire led Lily to the bedroom that had been preserved almost exactly as Elizabeth had left it. Lily moved through the space slowly, touching objects gently: Elizabeth's favorite books, her collection of art glass, the silver hairbrush on the vanity. She loved calla lilies, Robert said suddenly. They were always her favorite flower. Lily turned, her eyes wide. "That's what I was named after. Calla lilies." "I think so," Robert replied. "She kept a garden full of them at our summer house." As Lily examined the photos on Elizabeth's dresser, Claire opened the closet. "Dad, did you know about this?" she called out, pointing to a shelf lined with unmarked DVDs. Later that evening, the three of them sat in stunned silence as they finished watching the last video. Elizabeth, thin from cancer treatments, recording messages for both her daughters. The final video, dated just 3 days before her death, revealed everything. "Lily, my beautiful girl, if you're watching this, then I found the courage to tell you the truth, or Robert has discovered it after I'm gone. I've made so many mistakes, but giving you up was both my greatest regret and my greatest act of love. I was too broken, too afraid to keep you both. I thought separating you would protect you from our family's history of mental illness." Elizabeth's tired face filled with determination. "I've been watching over you all these years, making sure you had opportunities. The scholarship to Columbia wasn't luck. It was my way of bringing you home, closer to your sister. I planned to tell everyone the truth once you were both settled in New York, but then the cancer came." She wiped away tears. "Claire, Lily, forgive me for keeping you apart. You belong together. You always have." As the screen went dark, Claire and Lily sat side by side, their hands clasped tightly together. Robert saw in their identical faces the same expression Elizabeth used to have when she had made up her mind about something important. "We need to know everything," Claire said firmly. "No more secrets." Robert nodded, knowing it was time to share Elizabeth's journal and everything else he had discovered about the woman who had connected them all. 1 year had passed since the day Robert first saw Lily at the charity gala. The spring air was warm as he stood in the center of the newly completed memorial garden, watching as workers placed the final stone in the small fountain. The garden had been Claire and Lily's idea, a peaceful place dedicated to Elizabeth, filled with her beloved calla lilies and roses. Today was special. Not only was it the twins' 24th birthday, but it also marked the official opening of the Elizabeth Bennet Foundation for Single Mothers, created by Robert with both his daughters serving on the board. "It looks perfect, Dad," Claire said, approaching with Lily beside her. Though they still had their own unique styles, Claire in a flowing dress, Lily in jeans and a blouse, they had begun to look even more alike as they spent time together. They had the same walk, the same laugh, the same expressions. "Your mother would have loved it," Robert replied, his voice gentle with memory. The past year had been a journey of healing and discovery for all of them. After finding Elizabeth's journal and videos, they had pieced together the full story of her life. The mental health struggles she had hidden, her silent vigil over Lily's life, and her final plan to reunite her daughters. "The first group of mothers arrives next week," Lily said, checking her notes. 10 single women with twins, all receiving housing, childcare, and education support. The foundation had become Lily's passion. After learning about her birth mother's impossible choice, she had channeled her emotions into creating something positive. A support system that would ensure no other mother would face the heart-wrenching decision Elizabeth had. "Professor Halston called this morning," Claire added, referring to the DNA specialist they had consulted. "He confirmed what we already knew. We're identical twins, not fraternal. The chances of us both inheriting the genetic markers for mental illness would have been the same whether we were raised together or apart." Elizabeth's fear that separating the twins might protect one of them from the family's history of mental illness had been based on a misunderstanding of genetics. It was a painful reminder of how alone she had been, making life-altering decisions without proper support or information. Small groups of people began arriving for the private dedication ceremony: close friends, the board members of the foundation, and 2 special guests, David and Martha Morgan, Lily's adoptive parents. The Morgans had been hesitant at first, worried they might lose Lily to her biological family, but over months of careful relationship building, they had become part of the extended family circle. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is my life," Lily said quietly to Robert as they watched Claire greeting guests. "A year ago, I was just a graduate student struggling to pay rent, wondering where I came from." "Elizabeth would be proud of how you've handled all of this," Robert replied. "Both of you." The ceremony was simple and moving. Robert spoke briefly about Elizabeth's life and legacy. Claire read a poem. Lily revealed the foundation's first-year goals. Together, the 3 of them unveiled a small bronze plaque that read, * Elizabeth Bennet Memorial Garden *. Where separated hearts find their way back together *. Dedicated with love by Robert, Claire, and Lily *. As evening fell, lanterns illuminated the garden paths. The guests departed, leaving just the 3 of them, plus David and Martha Morgan, seated on benches near the fountain. "I've been thinking," Robert said, breaking the comfortable silence. "The summer house on Cape Cod has plenty of room for everyone. Perhaps we could all spend some time there next month." The invitation included the Morgans, a gesture that brought tears to Martha's eyes and a grateful nod from David. As they left the garden together, Robert watched Claire and Lily walking ahead, their identical profiles silhouetted against the sunset, one raised in privilege, one raised in modest circumstances, yet united by blood and now by choice. Elizabeth's greatest fear had been that her secret would destroy their family. Instead, revealing it had created something new and beautiful, a family bound not just by DNA, but by forgiveness, understanding, and love. Behind them, the fountain continued its gentle music, water flowing together after being briefly separated, just like the lives of the twins who had finally found each other.